Good morning. I'm going to start this video off with saying a big thank you to all the people who have already subscribed. I was not expecting anybody to be subscribed just yet, so thank you for the support. I will be doing my best to put at least 2 videos out per week, and I promise I will get better at this as well. I have a lot of things that I would like to share, a lot of different ideas, and mostly I'm here because I really would love if all the things that God put in my heart could help somebody out there. So that would be the biggest reward. So thank you so much. So it is morning in Italy. It's a little bit foggy, a little bit cold, but I'll say it's only a little bit cold because I'm Canadian. So I know what real cold is, and it's not real cold here. It's probably about 10 degrees. It's not that bad. Anyway, my kid's gone, my husband's gone, and I'm going to share a little thing with you that I've had on my heart for the last, I don't know, maybe ever since I started being interested in health. I've been interested in nature as well. I'll explain a little better. So you know how, if any of you have kids, especially in that phase, like toddler to older kid, you know, when they start wanting to do everything by themselves and they start screaming like, no, I want to do it by myself. So I have a 5-year-old, so I remember that stage. It's very intense. And you kind of let them, and then everything's a mess. It's a horrible mess. And so you have to kind of accept all their mess for quite a while, and then, you know, let them do it, let them learn. And then eventually they figure out what they can and cannot do, and they do ask for your help, so you have a little bit less of a mess. Anyway, a little bit. I feel like we're kind of like that. I see that as human beings, we're kind of like that, as in God has a certain way that he wants us to be, but we still like venture out and try to do things differently, figure things out, create things a little bit differently. And I don't think he has a very big problem with that. I think that, you know, he made us that way. He made us to use our minds and to create things and to do things. So, you know, building cities and buildings and trying to figure out new inventions and things to make things easier for ourselves, that's all great. But I think that in all of that, we've gotten farther and farther away from his original design for us. Throughout all the years of me studying health and food and how the body works, one of the things, I'm not sure where it came from, but one of the things that I've always done is referred back to nature. So I would question everything, especially if it was something impossible or if it was something that I just felt like, nah, I don't think that's right. I would always go back to nature and look at nature and be like, does this make sense within this context? Does this make sense considering how nature is? So, and of course, you know, considering how his original design was. And I think that nature has a lot of answers for us that we don't even realize. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. Our first clue is going to be in Genesis. So as soon as you start reading the Bible, it's so interesting because he already tells us how he created us and what his original design was. He created us in a garden to tend it. He created us in relationship, and he created us with animals. So in relationship with each other and in relationship with animals, and he created us in relationship with himself. So I think that's amazing because already he's telling you, where's your garden? You know, and where's your, you know, we were created to be outdoors as well, right? So where's your garden, your relationships, and your relationship with God. And the interesting part that I've just started kind of seeking out was the animal side. And that's, you know, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on in my video as well. So as I was saying before, when I was studying all of this, I would look at health. So I'm going to just give you like the most basic example, of course, would be like, what can I eat? Should I eat this or should I not eat this? And my answer would be, of course, did God make the food or did he not make the food? Is this something that God intended for us to eat, or is it something he did not intend us to eat? And it's not always so simple. You know, we do have to like dissect things, look at them a little bit more in depth. But using that question for direction, that was just my starting point for figuring things out, right? I would look at that. So did God make this food? Did he not make this food? Should we eat it or should we not? And that's just a basic example. Another example that I find extremely interesting, and I haven't heard very much on this subject, I don't think, but one thing that I use to gauge quantities and to gauge whether or not or whatever is what's available in nature to us. When we're thinking about, should I have like candy, sugar, desserts? Should I eat fruit? Should I have this or should I not? Should I be having loads of bread or not? And, you know, especially when it comes to like the carbs today, that's a big thing. My answer is, now always coming from the point of view that you're talking about a healthy person. Because if you're talking about a sick person, maybe you need to adjust certain things. But let's say as a human being, healthy human being, what should I be eating? And I would say always look at what's available to you in nature and how available are these things and how difficult would they be for you to acquire them if you had your garden. So I'm thinking you'd have vegetables, depends on where you live, obviously, which is important. So would you have vegetables all year round? You probably would. Would you have, I don't know, butter all year round? You probably could. Would you have your eggs all year round? Yes. Would you have your meat and your fish? You'd probably have your meat. You'd probably have your fish available to you. Now, of course, there's work involved in all of these things, but compare that work to, I don't know, to flour, for example, and even the baking of bread. That is such a long process compared to pick the vegetable, cook the vegetable. So it's not because you cannot, it's because I think that we've taken the work out of our communities when it comes to food. And so we don't have the gauging of quantities anymore. So we don't realize how much work would be behind making a loaf of bread every day. Not to say that we wouldn't do it, but we'd also be working. Just another side point. So like the work of gaining that bread, all of the harvesting and the making of the bread, that's a lot of spent physical energy. Anyway, to move on to the point. So I would gauge everything I learned or heard against this. Look at nature. And I'd look at nature in different ways. And that was one of the ways, was by gauging quantities and so forth. And I think that God started off telling us, yes, this is how I created you in the garden, in communion with each other, in communion with me and with animals. And if we're missing any of these aspects, we're going to be lacking in health. It's not healthy to be by yourself. It's not healthy to not be in communion with God. It's not healthy not to be in your garden. Now, when I say in your garden, I think that at the end of the day, it is so important. We're so lacking that contact with nature, right? Like we don't even know the half of it. So many people don't even know, well, so many kids also don't even realize where food comes from. And I think that's really sad. I think that's the very basics of life that we all need. Sometimes being in line with what God wants for us is as simple as looking at his original design. And I think that we don't take very seriously what he says to us, you know, what he's shown us in his nature and in his word. So another example would be when you look at nightshades. So I remember when somebody told me about nightshades, they were telling me, oh no, I have problems with eating those types of vegetables, right? And I was like, vegetables? So like, this is interesting. And like, I had to go figure it out. I had to go read into it, and I found out about the alkaloids in the vegetables and all of that stuff. And I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. I need to figure this out. And of course, I always refer to nature, and it didn't make sense to me. I thought, no, it's not possible. I need to figure this out. I need to understand. So I'm looking at the original design, and I realized two things about the nightshades. The first one being, if you have your own garden, your nightshade vegetables are going to be available to you for a certain amount of time in the year, not all year round. So the amount that you'd be eating is going to be a little bit less. If you did preserve some of it, you'd have to know how to preserve them. And I think that we lost a lot of that knowledge So it's not common knowledge anyways, unless you're somebody that homesteads or something. So we lost a lot of that knowledge. And then the other interesting thing about nightshade vegetables, aside from the fact that today they're available in, I forgot to say that. So yeah, they're available in grocery stores all year round now, right? You can have tomatoes and all of that stuff whenever you want. And then the other thing that was interesting about the nightshade vegetables was the fact that there are more alkaloids in them if you pick them too early. So if you pick them not fully mature, so the mature vegetables will have less in them. And we know that grocery stores, when they harvest the vegetables, they're going to be harvested immature. They're going to be harvested green because they want them to last longer. They don't want to throw away so much of it, right? So I thought, well, that's interesting, right? Because we are, in that sense, we're not doing what nature designed for us. So those vegetables should be available when they're available, and those vegetables should be taken care of, preserved in a certain way, and those vegetables should be eaten when they're mature, not picked when they're green. So I thought, okay, I can see how somebody could become sensitive to those things, especially considering perhaps all the other things that someone's been doing, having issues with their gut and all kinds of other problems. So it made more sense to me at this point. It's not that the vegetable itself was bad. See, so like God didn't invent a vegetable that was not good for us. So in that sense, I kind of always revert back to looking at nature. If I have a question, if something doesn't make sense to me, I'm going to look at what was God's original design. I'm sure that a lot of you have heard about the Mediterranean diet, for example. Now, I've been living in Italy for the last 18 years. I could tell you that it's not as healthy as everyone thinks. I mean, the people. It's not as healthy as, breakfast is just dessert. Let's start with that. It's sugar all over the place because like in the 70s, I've seen the commercials. They talked about how you need sugar. And so all the Italian mothers, all the old ladies still think it. They still think you need so much sugar because otherwise, I don't know, your brain will die or something. Anyway, so it's very unhealthy in the sense that there's a lot of sugar. It's a lot of sugar and a lot of pasta, and it's not good for anybody. I mean, I can tell you that the general health of people here is not like so great compared to anywhere else. There are some areas where people eat a little bit differently. It's not the same as, let's say, a big city. Most of it is quite westernized by now anyways. Just saying, it's not exactly how people imagine. Don't get me wrong, there's good food here, but it's not exactly the way it was a long time ago. But when we're talking Mediterranean diet, I think that what they mean is that here there's a huge culture in eating fruits and vegetables in season. So people still have the knowledge of that. And all the Italian mothers and grandmothers, when they do grocery shopping, and I never used to get it a long time ago, like when I just got here, I didn't get it. They'd be like, why are you buying that? Don't buy that. It's not the season for that. And I thought that was so weird. I was like, well, why do you care, And now I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. So we shouldn't be eating things that are out of season. And I know that here in Italy, that's a thing, right? Eat your fruits and vegetables in season. The Mediterranean diet is healthy because it's the in season off your land foods. So it's not because everybody needs to, have the olive oil and the olives, and everybody should have the exact same seafood and everybody should have the exact same, it's not because the diet needs to be the exact same thing. It's the concept of eating the foods fresh, eating the foods mature, the vegetables, fruits and vegetables that are picked mature from where you live, and eating the available foods of the area where you are. And that can be really hard to do, but that's another subject, depending on where you live, of course. So the idea of Mediterranean diet was so famous because of that, not because people here, generally all of them eat so well. I mean, they do eat a little bit better, but anyways, that's besides the point. Another thing that I've been looking into just now, but it gets all controversial. I'm not going to go all into it. And by the way, I'm not saying don't do this. Don't disclaimer, there's no medical advice in here at all. This is my way of looking at things, especially when it as it pertains to the Bible and God's creation. So one of the things that I've been looking a lot into, and I don't know how much of this I can share or not on YouTube, so I'm not going to go too much into it, but one thing that I've been paying a lot of attention to is the use of sunscreen. I'm always like, I don't know, like it feels so I mean, God created me, created the sun, he created this earth. And like the whole fear behind like, oh, but the sun will destroy me. I'm like, it doesn't ring true to me. So something in there is like, not, but of course, before I decide that I will never use sunscreen again, or I will never, use sunscreen on my daughter or whatever, I'm still hesitant to do it. But before I decide that, I do need to do quite a deep study. Like I need to get really into it. But this is one of those things where if I have a question or a doubt, I'm looking at the nature. I'm looking at God's creation. I'm trusting that he created nature the right way. Like he didn't make some kind of sun mistake. And I'm trusting that he is keeping this earth sustainable to my health, to the extent that as far as I'm obeying him. So if I'm obeying God, he will do the rest. You understand what I'm saying? So a lot of times we're forgetting that we have our parts to play as well. So yes, you might get burned in the sun if you lay there for, 5 hours at midday. Maybe don't do that. But on the other hand, I don't think that God made mistakes. It doesn't, I don't know, something in there, doesn't work for me. So that's just a thing that I'm studying: sunscreen, vitamin D, being outside, your eyes, the effect the sun has on your eyes, the use of sunglasses, what happens when you're out in the sun in the evening or early morning, because, there's the whole thing of, it's kind of exploding now about red light, which is supposed to be really good for you, for the production of melatonin and all kinds of things. So I'm looking a lot into that whole subject now, because I need anything that I learn has to align with God's design and what God said. Onto the subject of animals. So this is just because this is a mystery to me. I'm kind of, I don't have a conclusion to this point, but for the animal lovers out there, I thought I would just put this in there. When I was, growing up, my little sister was all into animals. So we know that all little kids love animals, right? Like little kids are always interested in the very basics of how God created us. So they're super interested in relationships with people. They're super interested in animals. They're super interested in food. So we all know that you buy them plastic food, you buy them plastic animals, and they're so interested in staring at anybody who's around them, right? So what was my point there? So when it came to animals, my little sister was so into animals. So she was more so than me, and to this day she still loves animals. And I was kind of like, not my thing, right? And I never understood her as well. So I think growing up, that was kind of like, I kind of like took the animals out of the equation. Like, what's the point? I know it's funny, but I kind of like rebelled against the whole animal thing, because I was like, I don't get it. I mean, I still don't get it, but maybe I get a little more now. So at one point, it's hard for me to recall the full dream, and I wish I'd written it down, but I had a dream, and the only thing that I really remember strongly about the dream was that God actually said to me, and that's very rare for me. It's not I don't, I haven't been very religious or any of that, but I remember him saying to me, animals are really important. They're more important than you think. And I remember waking up with like, oh my God, like I didn't know. And I remember kind kind of feeling convicted about that, because I was almost going the opposite way. Like, no, I don't need that. Like, okay, I was being a bit of a snob about animals, but anyway, um, he gave me that conviction. Like, it's not a frivolous thing. So also, on the other hand, people who take care of animals and people who love animals, they have another purpose, on this earth, and it's a godly purpose. And so I've been looking into the animals, right? And I looked into the Bible, and I was reading as much as I could about animals. Well, I'm still kind of studying all of that. And I'm going to read a couple of verses that I read. So one of them was, "Who teaches us more than the beasts of the earth and makes us wiser than the fowls of heaven?" And I thought, okay, yeah, that has a lot to do even with like what I've been all these years thinking about health, right? And animals have so much to teach. And like the more you learn about animals, the more amazing the more amazing they are, of course. And like one of my favorite animals to study is the orca. I think that they're just fascinating. So I think looking at studying animals is studying God's design and understanding more and more of God's design. The other thing that is amazing about animals, and I feel like there's a Bible verse on this, but I can't find anything. I can't find anything on it. And maybe somebody else out there, leave it in the comments, and maybe somebody knows where this came from, or if there's a Bible verse or somebody must have said it. But it was the idea that animals have never departed from God's design. So animals have always remained faithful to God's design, unlike us. So an animal will be an animal, period. There's no thinking about, maybe I could try to do this, or maybe animal is going to do what God designed them to do, period. So I then looked at the Bible, and I wanted to look at every mention that there was about animals in the Bible, starting in Genesis. I haven't finished, by all means. I mean, there's a lot more to read about. I kind of included that in part of like my Bible studies, but I wanted to see like the story of animals to find out. I feel like I'm trying to find out something. I'm trying to find out more than I know as well. So I'm not like, I don't have all the answers. But the first thing that I found was, of course, that, God created them. He blessed them to be fruitful and multiply, just as he did man when he created man. Then after he created man, he had man name them. He had Adam name them. So he created them. He blessed them. He had them named by man. And then he gave men dominion over them. Now, dominion might be an interesting word, because I think that, honestly, I think that a lot of people, when they hear the word, they think negatively. But I think that dominion, we have to look at the definition and the original plan for dominion that God had, because we tend to look at the negative. We tend to look at the things that men have done over the years. And I think that's not real dominion. That was just tyranny. But dominion means the responsibility to steward and care for, authority, governance, and rule. So it's not abuse. So men were intended to care for them. And then after that, the interesting thing that I read was, where is it? In Genesis 9, verse 3 and 4, "Behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you, and with every living creature that is with you." He goes on to name the fowl, the cattle, and of every beast on the earth. Now, the interesting thing is that he repeats that 5 times. He says that he establishes a covenant with men and with every living thing. And it's so interesting to me that like he included animals in his covenant. And I feel like this just shows us like how important they are. They're much more important than we've given credit for. And I think we don't really know why. I think it's a mystery, all the reasons why animals are so important and why God created every animal that he created. So I think there's more to find out about this. So if you know something, you tell me. I know animals for sure. We already know certain things. So we know that they They keep balance in the ecosystem. So we know that, a lot of animals that exist, without them, we wouldn't exist. So, or life on the planet wouldn't be possible. So, I mean, that's interesting. And obviously that's very important. They provide food for us as well in various ways. So, we have our milk and we have our butter and we have our eggs and then we have all our meat and the fish and all of that, right? They're a source of learning. So we learn a lot by watching them. They're just fascinating in general, of course, as well. So they satisfy like the natural curiosity we have for the things around us. They're our companions. So they incite our care and our love. And even like small children understand this. They understand this right away, right? They love animals right away. So as I said, I think there's a lot more to the mystery of animals than we realize. And if any of you have any thoughts on that, I'd love to read your comments about that. Let me know what you think. My favorite verse, as always, is the glory of God to conceal a matter and the honor of kings to seek it out. And I think that when we do find answers for certain things, they're beneficial to us in so many ways that we wouldn't have thought possible. These were just a couple of ways on how I look at health in general. I like to pay attention to God's original design for us. And I think animals have something to do with that. And I just don't know exactly what that is yet. So thank you for being here with me today. It's a super fun journey, working on getting better at it. And I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching my videos. Bye bye.